The E-League Major Qualifier took place last month and featured a lot of upsets. Now, it's true that it used the Swiss system, much as the ESL One Cologne qualifier did, which in itself is going to yield different results than if we have the traditional GSL group style, double elimination group style system. So that in itself can account for some of the different results because of the teams playing with a different system. But I think some of these upsets actually were as a result of the randomizer, where you ban out one team, Team A bans out 3 maps, Team B bans out 2 maps, Team B picks the side, 2 maps remain, and the randomizer picks between the 2 maps. I think that actually accommodated some of the upsets that occurred. So it wasn't just Swiss system, how people even played in the game, because before you start a game, you determine the map that you're going to play. Now, I think fans already underestimate the impact of which map you play. They think it's just about how well you play in the game, or they think they've seen a team win on that map before, so they could do it, even if they're actually not traditionally that good on it, and the other team's much stronger and has a better style on that map, a better understanding of the meta. So that's why I myself have dedicated so much of my time to making an emphasis of what map it is and which teams are strong on the maps and the trends of why they pick a map and what that probably says about how they're going to play the game and what they hope to accomplish and how strong they think the opponent is, because I think that's a really interesting part of the game. So one of the problems I have is that I see the randomizer having an impact on some of these results. And I'm not necessarily meaning that the team that won wouldn't have won, but making it much more likely that they won, or making it less questionable in terms of what might have happened on the other map that would have been in the normal ban format. So the traditional ban format outside of Valve tournaments would be that you each ban 3 maps and there's 1 map left and that's the map that you play. Now, it's not as simple as saying within this system, oh, well, the team that lost should have just banned better. Because first of all, the system sometimes meant that they might only be banning 2 maps anyway. Secondly, that's not the way the ban system works. Why should one team get 3 and one team get 2? How has that ever been explained as reasonable? Also, the system, that would also mean, for people's premise to be correct, that you have to ban to get 2 good maps for you into the randomizer. Now, that's already tough because the opponent's banning 3 maps away sometimes, or still even 2 maps away. How many strong maps do you have, and what's the shared map pool? So I actually think the part of the issue here is not that teams, in terms of upsets, didn't get maps they were good on. Good teams often did get the maps they were good on, because good teams tend to be the ones that have the big map pools. That's what makes them good teams. But it's more that some of the upsets came when it was a map that both teams had a chance on, both teams were good on, whereas otherwise the other map in the randomizer is a map that the team wouldn't have done as good on, wouldn't have had the same chance on, would have been penalised by both teams having 3 maps and not being able to play that map, and therefore not had a chance for the upset. So it makes the advantage greater for the underdog. I think the system doesn't work anyway, since the randomising element, even though it can make things better for the underdog, can also just fuck the underdog anyway and give them the map that they would have not been as good on as it is. So it's not even like there's any consistency to it. That's why I also don't like it. It's just random in that particular respect. I also think, finally, that people who say, yeah, but you get 3 bans or you get the starting side. Starting side is incredibly overrated unless you're in a system which revolves around round difference. And since we don't use that, that's just totally ridiculous. If you're much better on a map, it almost doesn't matter what side you start on. It's purely a psychological aspect, which, yes, can play into it. But you'll notice for the best teams, it doesn't play a role in it. And typically when they say that in interviews that they start on the wrong side, that's just an excuse. And even they would acknowledge it if you spoke to them privately. So the reason why I have a problem with the randomizer, I mean, you already know if you follow my work, I don't like random elements anyway. I mean, if you look up here, I did a video about no more random maps. Like, I think they ruined series. I'll probably do a video like this explaining how they've ruined some key series in the past. But I thought this would be a great opportunity to show how it spoiled or made less legitimate some of the results in a qualifier that use random maps when in a group stage setting. So one of the reasons I don't like them is that it's not that these results couldn't have happened. It's that these results would be more legit if we had the normal bans down to the 1 map and then that underdog team got the win. Then you'd have to say, tip your hat, it's only your play that got you through. It wasn't any other element. Whereas right now, there is an asterisk next to some of those results. Now, I will say, when I went through all the results, I not only went through the big upsets, but I went through results where I wanted to see, would this game of 2 evenly based teams, or teams that won very big over an underdog, would they have been closer if we'd have had the full ban out 6 and play 1? Now, interestingly enough, most of the games that I went through were not a problem, actually. Because in a lot of instances, the better team just chose to be the team that bans 3. I mean, by the way, here's a sidebar. I actually think that most of the teams that could have been Team A and instead chose to be Team B and picked the other side. If any favourite team did that, they fucked up, in my opinion. That was a bad decision. Because by picking to be ban 3 maps, you ensure that you actually get in theory, what a normal ban phase should look like. Because you get your 3 maps out, they choose between the last 2 maps, but they were going to choose anyway. They would have had the last ban, so it wouldn't even have mattered, and you would have ended up playing the map you're playing now, or a different map that they would probably have banned anyway. So actually, when you choose 3 bans, in those instances, most of those results were fine. So even though there were upsets, like Godsent beating G2, Godsent beating Dignitas, Optic beating Nip, these are all fine. Hellraiser's beating Mouse. And here's why. I'll explain a couple of them just to show you the point here. So when Godsent beat G2, they played on Overpass. Now that's fine because G2 had the 3 bans. And in the end, it would have been Godsent picking anyway. And they had to pick between Cash and Overpass. And they probably would have removed Cash and played Overpass anyway. So I don't think that's a problem right there. Yes, obviously G2's chances are higher if it goes to Cash. But actually, I don't think Godsent would have let Cash through because it's G2. So that would have been Overpass anyway. Therefore, Godsent still would have won anyway. Godsent beating Dignitas was on Mirage, right? Well, we know Dignitas loves Mirage. Godsent had the 3 bans here. So it was actually Dignitas picking. And Dignitas actually chose... would have chosen, I think, to remove Overpass and play Mirage anyway, because they play Mirage so much, and that's actually a map that they want to play, and Godsent's beaten G2, so obviously you're not going to want to play them on Overpass. I actually think that it would have been the same result, would have played Mirage, and it would probably be Godsent winning again. Optic beating Nip. Okay, yes, Optic now is rising through the ranks, but traditionally, Nip don't tend to lose to that type of a team. Well, they played an Overpass, right? Well, Nip were the one with the 3 bans. So Optic had the choice between Cash and Overpass. Now, yeah, they might have let Cash through, but actually I think if you look recently with their form on Overpass, they would have picked Overpass anyway. That doesn't matter. I'll give you one more. Okay, so Hellraisers beat Mouse. That was on Train. Now, it was Mouse who fucked up the pick ban there. Mouse banned the 3 maps. Hellraisers had the choice between Cash and Train, and Hellraisers is a Train, Cobblestone, and eventually we found out Overpass team. They weren't going to be playing Cash anyway, especially not against Mouse Sports, where Cash traditionally always one of their good maps. So it would have been Train as it was. It's all Mouse's fault that that one got fucked up. But you go away and you look at the ones that I think are the real deciders. These are the bullshit ones. These are the ones where it either gave the team no chance, who was an underdog because it was randomizer, or it put you in a, and yet they would have with normal ban, or it allowed an upset where otherwise there wouldn't be one. So here's one, for example. Okay, this actually decided Cloud9's fate. When they played Hellraisers, it was played on Overpass, a map that had been good to Hellraisers earlier, beating an IP on it in overtime. This was bullshit to me because Cloud9 had the 3 bans, but I actually think, if you look at it, the 2 maps remaining were Overpass and Train in the randomizer. Now, if you actually look at Hellraiser's history and the maps they were strong on, I actually think Hellraisers, given the choice, themselves would have removed Overpass and it would have been Train as the decider. Now, that doesn't mean that Hellraisers wouldn't win. Hellraisers are good on Train, but Train is traditionally this Cloud9 lineup's best map. I actually think that that's the map where if Cloud9 had gotten it, it would be a much more even game. And I actually think that Cloud9 will probably win that game. But, okay, Hellraisers, if they win on that and they beat Cloud9 on Train, it's like, well, even more props to you, right? Even more legit. So there's one I have a problem with. Mouse Sports beating Immortals on Cash. Now, this is one, again, where I have an issue because Mouse Sports did their 3 bans, that's fine. And the maps that it came down to were Cash and Mirage. Now, in this scenario, it's a bit similar to the one before. I actually think Immortals, almost certainly, given the choice, with an extra ban as they would have had, would have removed Cash. They would have chosen to play Mirage instead. Strong map for both teams, but traditionally a map that Immortals, especially this lineup, particularly likes to play. So they would have had a much better chance, I think, to win on that map, and I think actually I probably would pick them to win in that scenario. Dignitas playing G2. Now, I do think Dignitas is a better team than G2, but the way the pick ban went down, I actually think made G2 have a bigger disadvantage than they should have had. Because Dignitas had the 3 bans, and G2 would have been left with the choice of Nuke or... let me think. I think it was Nuke or Overpass, that's right. And it ended up being Nuke, and Dignitas is one of the best in the world on Nuke, especially on both sides of the map. So you never really are out of a game with them. They're never really out of a game with you, rather. And so as a result, G2's been all right on it and has played it a bunch, but hasn't been that great. They've been like a bit middling on the map. Now, here's the thing. Even though G2 certainly had their own issues on Overpass, they've played it a bunch, and if you look at their recent history, adding in that they know Dignitas is strong on Nuke, I actually think they would have chosen to play Overpass, and we've seen them play it a bunch recently, and in a bunch of key situations. So I think that would have been, Dignitas versus G2 on Overpass is a much closer game than on Nuke, in my opinion. So there's another chance for, I mean, obviously no one went out in that scenario, they both end up qualifying, but I think that could have very much changed the fortunes of the tournament. Then you go to Envious play Tai Lu. Now, Envious smashed them. This was fine. It was on Dust 2, if you remember. Well, I guess it wasn't entirely a smash, but yeah, this was like pretty solid stuff by him. In fact, actually, maybe they did wreck them. I can't remember the full score of that one. But I think Tai Lu could have had a much better chance because Envious had the 3 bans, Envious ban out, and Tai Lu would have had the choice between Dust 2 and Cash. Now, it ended up being randomized to Dust 2. I think in no universe does Tai Lu pick Dust 2 to be the map. They would have banned Dust 2 and they would have played Cash. Tai Lu likes Cash. Envious is very good on Cash as well, so that's another scenario where you both share the map, but it would have given Tai Lu a much better chance at an upset, whereas on Dust 2, they looked like they didn't even know what to do. They had no clue whatsoever. Envious has gotten much stronger on Dust 2 over the last few months. It's become one of their core maps again. When Mouse Sports beat Tai Lu, here's another chance where Tai Lu could have had upset potential with a normal ban phase, but were not able to, because Mouse Sports did their 3 bans, and Tai Lu had to pick between Train and Mirage. Now, in the randomizer picked Train. Now, we know, yes, Mouse Sports are not a strong team on Train, but they're okay on it. Tai Lu, not a strong team on Train at all. In fact, actually, that's one of their weaker maps. It's one that they don't particularly know how to play, in my opinion, especially not against European competition. So Train coming up for me was an auto loss. I knew Tai Lu was out as soon as that happened. If it comes up Mirage, which would have been the case, because Tai Lu would have banned out Train. Now, on Mirage, both teams like Mirage. But this is Tai Lu's map where, yeah, I think Tai Lu would still lose to Mouse, but it would be much more competitive. I'd certainly like to see how Mouse Sports coped with that Tai Lu style of play on Mirage. That would be very interesting. And also, I think you've seen that's where some of the upsets from Tai Lu, despite the fact they haven't won that many, they have had some of their key upsets on Mirage. So that would have been a much better chance for them right there. Like, what's funny is the way this tournament went actually gave Tai Lu almost no chance to get through because they couldn't get any of the maps, even though in a normal pick ban with more bans, they would have been playing maps they enjoyed more. The randomizer really worked against them. And a final one would be obviously the biggest upset of the tournament was Vega Squadron Nip. Now here's an example again of where it sounds counterintuitive, but actually I think Vega Squadron would have given Nip an even bigger chance if there'd been a full 6 bans, because it ended up being on Cash. Now, Nip had the 3 bans. They banned out, and it was going to be between Cash and Dust 2. Now, if you Nip, that's fine. You know you can play both. You're pretty good on both. The problem is, I actually think Vega Squadron would have banned Cash. If you look at what else happened in the tournament, I think they would have chosen to play Dust 2. And actually, I think that would be a map where it's much more likely Nip doesn't get run over and that Nip actually probably wins. So in a weird way, the randomizer actually gifted Vega Squadron a map they probably wouldn't have picked, and yet then they were able to win on it. Yeah, Nip traditionally were good on Cash, not as much recently. So there's a few maps there that really affected the outcomes of the tournament. Even otherwise, on the ones that were fine, I mean, that's not a solution, the fact that they were fine, because again, the randomizer could have fucked all of those ones up as well. Instead, it's a scenario where those ones, we just got lucky with the randomizer that they didn't fuck up the game. So I hope in the future we can just remove all random elements. Why do we need random elements in the top? What's great is we have a system, we have strategy, and we have planning that you can make based on what people are likely to do, and then teams can get to maps that they at least choose to play, and therefore they control their own fate in some way, not just some randomizer gifting some people pass through, and then some people a much harder route to get to the qualifier, to get to the major rather. And obviously this is an issue because this randomizer will be used at the major. So it'll determine who becomes legends and who actually does well in their CSGO career.